rain poured heavily in the village of Kubwa, as if the sky itself was weeping for what was about to happen. Inside a small crumbling house at the edge of the village, 17-year-old Amara sat quietly in a corner, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was a gentle girl with kind eyes and a soft voice, never answering back, never complaining, even when her stepmother Selina shouted at her or made her sleep on the cold floor. Life hadn't been fair to her since her father died. Her father had remarried quickly, and Selina had never accepted her. Instead, she favored her own daughter, unloved, who was loud, demanding, and always dressed in pretty new clothes, while Amara wore torn hand-me-downs. That night, Selina's anger was louder than the thunder outside. "You eat my food, breathe my air, and give me nothing," she screamed, grabbing Amara by the arm. Unloved watched from the doorway, a cruel smirk on her face. Go and beg on the streets." "That's where you belong," Selina shouted, dragging Amara outside. The rain soaked her thin clothes instantly. Her torn slippers squished in the mud as Selina pushed her out of the gate. Amara stood there, shivering and heartbroken, while the door slammed behind her. No bag, no money, no goodbye, just the cold, cruel night and a heart full of pain. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't hurt, but because she was used to hiding her tears. Still, something inside her whispered, "This is not the end." The next morning, Amara walked and walked until her legs felt like they would fall off. Her clothes were still wet from the night before, and the muddy road clung to her slippers like they didn't want to let her go. She had no idea where she was going. All she knew was that she had to get away from Kubwa, away from Selina, away from the pain. By evening, she found herself in Mji Kuu, a big, noisy city that smelled like smoke, street food, and dreams that hadn't come true yet. The sky was turning dark again, and the cold wind whipped through her thin dress. People rushed past her, busy with their lives, not stopping to see the girl standing alone with red eyes and trembling hands. Amara looked around for a place to rest. Her stomach growled so loudly it almost made her cry again. In a quiet alley behind a row of food stalls, she spotted an old wooden cart that had one wheel missing. She crawled under it, hugging herself tightly to stay warm. The ground was hard, the smell was bad. Rats ran nearby, but at least no one would chase her away. She tried to sleep, but her body wouldn't stop shaking. Tears silently rolled down her cheeks. "Why did they hate me so much?" she thought. "What did I do wrong?" Just then, a soft voice called out, "Child, are you all right?" Amara looked up and saw an old man with kind eyes and a crooked smile. He wore a patched shirt and smelled like roasted corn. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "My name is Tunde. I sell food here. Come, sit by my stall." Too tired to argue, Amara slowly crawled out. Tunde gave her a small wooden stool to sit on and handed her a warm piece of flatbread wrapped in a napkin. "Eat, child, you need your strength," he said. Amara took the bread with shaky hands and whispered, "Thank you." It was the first kindness she had received in what felt like forever. As she ate, Tunde sat beside her and placed an old but clean blanket over her shoulders. "I've seen many people come and go in this city," he said, watching the street. "Some broken, some lost. But I've also seen people rise from nothing and become something this world never expected." Amara listened quietly, tears still clinging to her eyelashes. "They told you you're worthless, didn't they?" he asked gently. She nodded, too afraid to speak the truth out loud. "Well," he said, patting her shoulder softly, "you are more than they made you believe. Don't carry their lies in your heart. Carry your own truth. That's the only thing that will take you forward." Amara looked at him, eyes wide. No one had ever said anything like that to her, not even her own father. That night, under the streetlight glow and wrapped in Tunde's blanket, she didn't feel safe, but she didn't feel completely alone anymore. She was still scared, still unsure. But something inside her had shifted. A tiny spark had been lit. She laid down near Tunde's stall, her head resting on her arm, and looked up at the stars peeking through the clouds. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I still have something left. Maybe I'm not done yet." And for the first time in a long, long while, she fell asleep with hope. The sun peeked through the clouds the next morning, casting a soft golden light over the busy streets of Mji Kuu. The city was already alive, vendors shouting prices, children chasing each other, buses honking like impatient beasts. But in a quiet corner near Bahba Tunde's food stall, Amara sat with her knees pulled to her chest, gently rocking back and forth. She wasn't begging, she wasn't bothering anyone. She just sat there, lost in her thoughts, and then, without meaning to, she began to hum. It was a soft, sweet melody, one her mother used to sing when the world felt safe. Her voice wasn't loud, just a whisper carried on the wind. But it had something in it, something real, something that made the heart ache. Her eyes were closed as she hummed. She didn't see the people passing by. She didn't notice the way the world paused around her. Zola Ndedi was rushing to a meeting at the Mji Kuu National TV office when she heard it. She was a woman used to fast cars, big decisions and bright lights. But the moment that voice reached her ears, her heels slowed. She turned her head, trying to find the source. It couldn't be, not here, not in the street. She followed the sound like someone chasing a dream, and there, sitting on the sidewalk next to a basket of roasted corn, was a girl in torn clothes with hair that hadn't seen a comb in days. Zola Ndedi's breath caught in her throat. "Who sings like that from the gutter?" she whispered, frozen in place. Amara didn't notice her. She kept humming, the notes dancing softly from her lips, full of pain and love, and memories too big for her young heart. Bahba Tunde saw Zola Ndedi standing there and walked over. "She's not a beggar," he said gently, "just a lost soul trying to find her way." "She has it," Zola Ndedi said, almost to herself. "That thing you can't teach. That feeling. That raw magic." Bahba Tunde smiled and nodded. "She sings sometimes when she forgets the world is watching." Zola Ndedi stepped closer. "What's her name?" "Amara," he replied. "She came here with nothing but sadness in her eyes. But her voice makes people stop." Slowly, Zola Ndedi knelt down beside the girl. "Amara," she said softly. Amara opened her eyes, startled. She looked at the elegant woman in front of her, unsure whether to run or stay. "I'm not here to hurt you," Zola Ndedi said. "I just want to ask you something." Amara blinked, confused and scared. "Would you sing that song again?" "For me?" Zola Ndedi asked, her voice kind and steady. Amara hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the blanket Bahba Tunde had given her. No one had ever asked her to sing before, not like this. Not with kindness. "I don't sing for people, but it's just my mother's song." "Then sing it for her," Zola Ndedi said. "Sing it like she's listening." Amara looked down at her hands, took a deep breath and began to sing. This time with words. The lullaby floated through the air like a secret, wrapping around hearts and pulling tears from eyes that didn't know they could still cry. When she finished, the street was silent. Zola Ndedi stood slowly, her heart pounding. "Come with me," she said. "I don't know where this will go, but the world needs to hear you." Amara looked at her, stunned. She had spent the last night sleeping under a broken cart. Now a stranger wanted to take her to a place where her voice could shine. She didn't understand it, but something told her maybe this was her moment, maybe this was her beginning. The next morning felt like a dream. Amara wasn't sure she wanted to wake up from. She stood in front of the big building that said Mji Kuu National TV, staring up at it like it might vanish if she blinked. She had never seen such a place before, glass doors that opened on their own, people in shiny clothes rushing past, cameras being wheeled down long hallways. It all felt like another world. Zola Ndedi stood beside her, calm and confident, dressed in a stylish coat with her clipboard in hand. "Don't worry," she said gently. "Just be yourself. Let them hear you. Not the clothes, not the hair, just the voice." Amara looked down at her borrowed shoes, too big and slightly scuffed, given to her by a cleaner at the studio who'd heard her story and wanted to help. Her dress was plain, and her hair was still a bit messy despite Bahba Tunde's best attempt to neaten it with a little oil and water. But her heart was full of something strong. Fear, yes, but also something else, a tiny burning hope. Inside the studio, the stage lights were bright and blinding. The seats were filled with people, producers, judges, and crew members who'd seen hundreds of hopefuls before. Most of them looked bored, scrolling on their phones or chatting quietly. Another girl in old clothes, what could she possibly offer? Amara stood on stage, hands shaking slightly. She looked out at the crowd and suddenly felt small. But then she closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her lids, she saw her mother. She remembered the way her mother used to hold her and sing softly at night, the way her voice made the world feel safe. So she opened her mouth and sang. At first, just a single note floated into the air, clear, pure. Then came the melody, and her voice began to rise and fall like the wind over a quiet field. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't trained, but it was real. It carried every night she had slept cold, every tear she hadn't cried, every insult she had swallowed, and it reached everyone in the room like a whisper that became a wave. One by one, phones were lowered. Conversations stopped. A cameraman leaned in. A judge put down his pen. The silence was loud, and no one dared to break it. When she finished, the last note hung in the air for a few seconds before it gently faded. For a moment, no one moved, and then slowly someone clapped. Then another and another, until the whole studio echoed with applause. Amara stood frozen. She had never heard people clap for her, never felt what it was like to be seen and valued. Zola Ndehdi was smiling from ear to ear. One of the judges leaned forward and said into the mic, "Young lady, where have you been hiding?" Amara looked down at her shoes and whispered, "I wasn't hiding, I was just trying to survive." And with that, the room fell in love with her, not just her voice, but her story, her strength, her soul. That day, Amara wasn't the girl from the street anymore. She was the girl who stood on a national stage with nothing but borrowed shoes and a broken heart and sang a song the whole world would remember. The next morning, Mji Kuu woke up to a storm, but not the kind with rain. This storm came from screens, speakers, and every street corner where people gathered. It was the sound of one name echoing everywhere, Amara. It started with a single video clip, her audition, just 2 minutes of her standing on that stage, singing with her eyes closed and her soul wide open. Someone from the audience had filmed it and posted it on social media with the caption, "This girl just silenced an entire studio. Who is she?" By the time the sun fully rose, the clip had already been shared thousands of times. TV channels picked it up. Radio hosts played her voice between songs. News reporters called her the mystery voice. Every headline seemed to shout the same thing. From street to star, unknown girl leaves judges speechless. People were talking about her in cafes, in schools, in taxis. Did you hear her voice? Where is she from? She's not trained. They say she lived on the street. No way. That voice is a gift from heaven. Children tried to hum the lullaby she had sung. Elderly women wiped tears from their eyes, watching the replay. Even men who never cared for music were moved. There was something in her voice that didn't just entertain, it healed. It spoke to a part of everyone that had ever felt alone, abandoned, or forgotten. Amara, unaware of the explosion she had caused, sat quietly in a guest room the studio had arranged for her. She held a cup of tea in her trembling hands, still processing what had happened the night before. She had no phone, no mirror, no idea that her face had become the most recognized in the country overnight. Zola Ndehdi burst into the room, phone in hand, face glowing with excitement. "Amara, you don't understand. You've gone viral. Everyone is talking about you, every single person." Amara blinked. "Viral?" "Yes, you're on all the channels. People are calling you the soul of Mji Kuu. Look." She handed her the phone, showing post after post. Comments flooded in. I cried listening to her. This girl gave me goosebumps. She's not just a singer, she's a miracle. Amara stared at the screen in silence. Her own face was looking back at her, glowing under the stage lights, mid-song. It felt strange, surreal. "They really see me," she whispered. Zola Ndehdi knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart, for the first time the world sees you. And they don't just hear your voice, they feel your heart." Across the city, people tried to find out who she was. Journalists begged for interviews. Magazines wanted her on the cover. Music producers fought over who would get to work with her. But all Amara could think about was her mother. Would Mama be proud of me? Would she hear my song from the sky? Bahbatunde, the street vendor, watched the news on a small TV in his store. He smiled with tears in his eyes. "I knew it," he whispered. "That girl's voice was too big for the streets." And back in the village of Kubwa, a teacup slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the floor. But that moment wasn't ready yet, for now the world belonged to Amara. The girl no one wanted, the voice no one could forget. In the quiet village of Kubwa, the morning began like any other. Birds chirped lazily in the trees, smoke rose from small cooking fires. Radios buzzed in the background with soft chatter. Inside Selina's house, the air smelled of warm tea and fresh bread. Selina sat at the small wooden table, sipping from her favorite cup, dressed in her usual fine robe, with her gold bangles lightly clinking as she stirred her tea. Naledi, her spoiled daughter, scrolled through her phone with a bored look on her face. "Ugh, nothing new," she said, rolling her eyes. "Only that stupid talent show again. Everyone's talking about some mystery girl with a big voice." Selina shrugged, not interested. "Every year they bring out some poor child to sing and cry. It's nothing special." But just as she lifted the cup to her lips, the TV on the shelf changed scenes, and there it was. A glowing stage, a standing ovation, and then a close-up of the singer's face. The camera zoomed in as the host shouted, "Give it up for the golden voice of Mji Kuu, Amara." The name hit the room like a slap. Naledi froze, her phone slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a thud. That's her," she shrieked, pointing at the screen. Selina's hand trembled, the teacup dropped, crashing onto the table and spilling hot tea everywhere. Her face went pale as she stared at the TV, lips trembling. No, it can't be. She was supposed to disappear. The camera cut to Amara's smiling face, eyes shining under the stage lights, waving shyly at the audience. Her voice echoed in the background from the performance clip, strong and beautiful. Naledi covered her mouth, shocked. "Mama, she's famous. They're calling her a star." Selina didn't answer. She was frozen, eyes locked on the screen, her mind spinning. She remembered that rainy night, how she dragged Amara out of the house like trash, yelling at her to leave, to vanish. She had slammed the door and thought that was the end of her. A poor, unwanted girl. How could she survive? But not only had she survived, she had risen. Now the whole country was watching her. The girl Selina had called a burden, the one she had left out in the cold, with nothing but torn slippers and old memories. "Mama," Naledi said, voice trembling, "what if people find out? What if they know what we did to her?" Selina's hands clenched into fists. "No one will know. We say nothing. We don't talk to anyone. She's gone. She's not our problem anymore." But even as she said it, her voice sounded weak. She knew the truth. The world was falling in love with Amara. And sooner or later, the truth always comes home. Outside, a few neighbors were already gathering around their own radios and TVs. They pointed, whispered, some already connecting the dots. "Wasn't that Selina's stepdaughter?" one woman asked. Inside the house, Naledi backed away from the TV, guilt creeping into her chest. "She looked happy," she whispered. "She didn't even look like the same girl." Selina didn't respond. She sat quietly, staring at the broken teacup. The spilled tea running like a river across the table, the same river of regret now rising inside her. And on the TV screen, Amara smiled. Not out of revenge, but because finally she had found something no one could take from her. A voice, a place in the world, and a story that was just beginning. The lights were soft in the studio that evening. The host sat across from Amara, smiling gently, but everyone in the room could feel the tension, like something important was about to happen. The cameras rolled, and millions of eyes across Africa watched their screens. For days, people had been talking about her voice. Now they were about to hear her truth. Amara sat quietly at first, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, but her presence was powerful. Her eyes looked calm, but deep inside her heart was racing. This was not just another interview. This was her moment to speak for every girl who had ever been made to feel small. The host leaned forward. Amara, your voice has moved the world, but many still don't know where you came from. Would you be willing to share your story? Amara nodded slowly. She took a breath and then, with quiet strength, began to speak. I was born in a small village called Kubwa. My mother died when I was very young. She was the only person who ever truly loved me. After she passed, I lived with my stepmother and her daughter. Things changed. I was no longer treated like family. I became invisible. Her voice trembled for a second, but she didn't stop. I was given the leftovers, the broken shoes, the smallest blanket. They told me I was nothing, a burden, a mistake. And one night, in the rain, they threw me out. No bag, no food, not even a goodbye. Gasps filled the studio. The host's eyes watered. Viewers watching from home leaned closer to their screens, many holding their breath. I walked for hours, Amara continued. I ended up in the city of Mji Kuu with no place to go. I slept under a cart. It was cold. I was hungry. I cried until I had no more tears. But I didn't break. Something inside me, maybe my mother's memory, kept me going. She smiled softly, remembering. A man named Bahba Tunde. A street vendor saw me. He didn't ask questions. He just gave me bread and a blanket. That was the first kindness I'd felt in years. I will never forget it. The host wiped away a tear. And your voice? When did you discover it? Amara looked up. My mother used to sing me lullabies. I remembered one and started humming it, just to comfort myself. That's when Miss Zola and Dadi heard me. She didn't laugh at me. She didn't judge my clothes or my dirt-stained face. She just listened. She saw something in me. She paused, then added, "That's when everything changed." The studio was silent. Not a single sound. Even the cameramen were still. Amara took another deep breath. I want people to know that pain doesn't have to be the end. That even if the people who should love you turn their backs on you, kindness from strangers can still save your life. The host nodded, voice shaking. You are a miracle, Amara. The interview ended with a standing ovation from the studio audience. Across the country, thousands of messages flooded social media. People cried, people shared, people told their own stories of survival and pain. Amara's truth had gone viral, but not because it was shocking, because it was real. And because in a world full of noise, her voice, soft, strong, and honest, was something the world had been waiting to hear. The sun was bright over Kubwa as a line of cars slowly made their way through the narrow village road. Children ran barefoot beside them, waving and laughing, their eyes wide with excitement. Something big was happening, something the village hadn't seen in years. At the center of it all sat Amara, looking out the window of a black SUV, her heart pounding. It had been months since she'd left Kubwa, with nothing but torn slippers and pain in her chest. But now she was back. Not broken, not angry, but stronger than ever. Not for revenge, but for something far more powerful. As the cars stopped near the old village square, people gathered, whispering and pointing. Is it really her? She came back. That's Amara, the one from the TV. Amara stepped out, dressed in a soft green dress, her natural curls tied back, her smile warm. She looked around at the place she used to cry in, the road where she once begged for kindness. And now she stood tall, not as a victim, but as a voice. Behind the crowd, Selina watched from her doorway. Her face was tight, her eyes dark with fear and shame. She didn't come forward. She just stood there, half hiding behind her curtain, remembering the night she threw Amara into the rain. Nahledi stood beside her, dressed in new clothes, makeup carefully done. She smiled nervously, hoping Amara would notice her, maybe even wave. But Amara didn't look their way. She walked straight to the small hill beside the schoolyard. A microphone was waiting for her. She took a deep breath and looked out at the crowd, old neighbors, teachers, children sitting cross-legged on the grass. Thank you for coming, she began softly. Many of you knew me when I was just the quiet girl living in Selina's house. Some of you saw me walking barefoot in the rain. Some maybe looked away, and that's okay, because today is not about the past. She smiled as the crowd leaned in, listening closely. I came back to give something that I never had when I needed it most. A place to feel seen, a place to sing, a place to be safe. She turned and pointed to a covered structure behind her. A large cloth was pulled off, revealing a beautiful new building, bright blue walls, wide windows, and a sign that read, Amara's School of Voices and Light for every child with a voice. The crowd gasped and then clapped louder and louder. Some even cried. The children jumped up, shouting her name. Amara! Amara! One little girl ran to her and hugged her tightly. Will you teach us to sing? She asked. Amara knelt down, smiling. Yes, baby, I'll teach you everything I know. In the background, Selina sat down quietly on her step, her hands shaking. She didn't know what hurt more, the shame or the kindness she didn't deserve. Nahledi tried again to wave. Hi, Amara, she said softly, smiling. But Amara simply looked past her, not in anger, not in hate. She had just moved on. Because the truth is, some wounds don't need revenge. They heal when you become more than what they tried to destroy. And that day, as the village clapped and the music school doors opened, Amara proved that even the girl thrown out like trash can return as treasure. The city of Mji Kuu had never seen anything like it. That night, the sky was full of stars, but none shone brighter than the one standing on the stage. Amara, her first live concert titled From Street to Song, had sold out in hours. The stadium was packed, with thousands of fans, cameras flashing, and the world watching from their screens. But even with all the lights and cheers, Amara stood there with tears in her eyes. Not because she was scared, but because she had never imagined this moment could be real. The stage was beautifully set, with soft gold lights and a large banner that read, To the forgotten girls who were told they'd never matter. Every little detail was her idea. She had planned it all for one reason, to sing not just for fame, but for healing. As the music started and the crowd began to cheer, Amara stepped forward slowly, holding the mic close. The audience went quiet. Everyone was waiting. Her voice filled the air like a warm wind, soft, deep, and full of emotion. She started with the lullaby her mother used to sing, the one that first got her noticed on the street. And as she sang, people wept, not just because of the melody, but because they felt every word. Her voice carried her pain, her hope, her journey. After the first song, she paused. Her eyes scanned the crowd, then she spoke gently into the microphone. When I was thrown out on the street, I thought my life was over. I thought no one would ever see me or hear me again. But the silence gave me something else, a voice I didn't know I had. And tonight I sing for every girl who's ever been left behind, for every child who felt invisible. You are not forgotten. Your story still matters. The crowd roared with applause, but she wasn't done. She continued, Your worth isn't measured by the love you didn't receive. It's measured by the strength you find in your darkest moment, and the voice you find in the silence. A soft gasp swept through the stadium. Some held their hands over their mouths. Others closed their eyes, letting her words sink in. She went on to sing more songs about broken hearts, about survival, about mothers who live in memories, and strangers who show unexpected kindness. Each note told a story. Each lyric wrapped around someone's pain like a gentle hug. In the front row sat Baba Tunde, the street vendor who once gave her bread and a blanket. Amara saw him and smiled through tears. She pointed to him during one song and said, You saved me before the world knew my name. He stood and clapped, wiping his eyes. In another corner of the stadium, Selina and Nahledi sat quietly. They had come, invited by Amara's manager, but this time there was no anger, no shouting, just silence. Selina watched the stage with heavy eyes, realizing the girl she threw away had become someone the whole world now loved. The final song of the night was called Rise Again, and when Amara sang the last line, even from the coldest ground a flower can still bloom, the stage exploded with golden lights and gentle firework. People stood, clapping, crying, cheering. Amara bowed her head, not just in thanks, but in peace. She'd finally made it, not to the top of the charts, but to the hearts of those who needed her the most. The night sky over Mji Kuu exploded with fireworks, painting colors across the dark clouds. Thousands of people stood with their eyes lifted, cheering and clapping. But the biggest moment wasn't in the sky. It was on the giant screen at the center of the stadium. Bold letters appeared in gold light. Amara, Africa's soul voice. People screamed with joy. Some held up banners, others wiped their tears. News reporters shouted into their microphones, "History is being made tonight." Cameras flashed, recording every second. Social media flooded with her name, from village radios to city billboards, from little huts in Kubwa to skyscrapers in Mji Kuu. Everyone knew who she was now. Backstage, Amara stood quietly looking at the crowd. Her heart was full. She had been broken, thrown out like trash, left to sleep on cold streets. But she rose. She didn't just survive, she shined. And now the whole world was watching, not with pity, but with admiration. Far away in Kubwa, Selina sat in front of an old TV, her hands trembling as she watched the broadcast. Nahledi sat beside her, frozen in silence. The girl they had called useless, a burden, was now the voice of a continent. Regret filled the room like smoke. Selina said nothing. She couldn't. Words had failed her, just like love had failed Amara. But Amara had found something stronger than hate. She had found her voice. And now that voice was lighting up the sky.
Please tell me, are you enjoying the story? If so, tell me what lessons have you actually learned? I would really love to hear your comments in the comment section down below. And remember to support this channel, please subscribe, like the video, comment, just say something, even a word could literally mean a whole lot. So I want you to tell me what lessons have you learned from this story. Trust me, these are situations that most people actually go through. I'm sure some of you that are watching this story have actually gone through this situation. So I want to hear from you. I want to hear how you dealt with the situation that you were faced with.
The interview studio was quiet, the lights soft, and the cameras ready. Amara sat on the red couch, her hands shaking just a little. The host smiled gently and asked, "Who are you really?" For a moment, she looked down, then lifted her head with calm strength. "I'm Amara, a girl who was thrown out with nothing, a girl who used her tears to water her dreams." The audience sat still, eyes wide. She continued, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't grow up with love. I was called a burden, unwanted, trash. But the streets didn't break me. They taught me to fight, to feel, to sing." Then came the line that shook everyone watching, both in the studio and across the country on their screens. "Sometimes pain teaches you how to sing louder." Her voice cracked just a little, but she didn't cry. The host leaned forward, clearly moved. "And where is your family now?" he asked. She paused, smiled sadly, and replied, "The people who showed me kindness when I had nothing, they're my family now." Millions watched the clip that evening. It went viral within hours. People everywhere were asking, "Who is this girl? Where did she come from?" And slowly, the truth began to spread. But still, no one knew the full story. No one knew the woman who once slammed the door on her was now sitting in a small village house, watching the same interview with a pale face and a heavy heart. In the quiet house of Kubwa, the TV was always on now, but not for news or drama. It was always tuned to Amara. Her interviews, her songs, her story. Every channel had something about her. Nahledi sat on the couch, arms crossed, jaw tight. Every time Amara's face appeared on the screen, she felt her stomach twist. The same girl they all called useless. The same girl who wore torn slippers and ate leftovers. Now she was being called Africa's soul voice. Nahledi couldn't understand it. She had always been the pretty one, the pampered one, the one with clean clothes, birthday parties, and attention. Amara was supposed to stay in the shadows, not shine brighter than the sun. "This is unfair," Nahledi muttered one night, staring at the TV. "That should have been me. I could have been famous too if someone had just given me a chance." But deep down, she knew the truth. She never had Amara's heart, her pain, or her strength. She only had comfort, and now that comfort tasted bitter. One evening, Selina noticed her daughter pacing around, eyes wild with thoughts. "What are you thinking, Nahledi?" she asked. Nahledi turned, eyes sharp. "If she can rise from nothing, I can rise from here too. And if I can't be her, I'll at least stand beside her so the world sees me too." She opened her old social media accounts and posted a long message with an old childhood photo of her and Amara. proud of my sister Amara. She's always been a star, even when no one saw it. I'm with you, sis. Always. Within minutes, the comments came pouring in. People began praising her. Wow, such a supportive sister. She's lucky to have you. True love in a broken world. Naledi smiled as the likes grew, but she didn't smile out of love. It was jealousy wearing a pretty mask. Later that week, she managed to contact one of Amara's team members. She sweet-talked her way in. I want to surprise her. I want to be part of her healing. We're family after all, she said with a soft smile. The woman was touched. That's beautiful. I'm sure Amara would love that. But Naledi had a plan. She didn't want to reconnect. She wanted cameras, attention, headlines. Long-lost sister reunites with star singer. She even practiced her emotional tears in front of a mirror, pressing her fingers to her eyes until they looked red. When she finally got to meet Amara at a private event, she wore a soft blue dress and brought flowers. Cameras were rolling. Amara was surprised, a little confused, but hugged her. The crowd clapped. Naledi whispered, "I've missed you, sister." Amara didn't say much. She just smiled politely, but something felt off. Naledi's eyes didn't shine with warmth. They burned with something colder. She stuck close to Amara that day, making sure she was in every photo, answering questions that weren't hers, laughing louder than needed. One reporter even asked, "Do you sing too, Naledi?" She giggled and replied, "We both grew up with music. Maybe you'll hear from me soon too." That night, Amara sat alone in her dressing room, staring at the mirror. She could feel something wasn't right. Her heart, which had survived the streets, recognized false love easily. She whispered to herself, "Some people don't return because they miss you. They return because they miss the spotlight." But she didn't say anything yet. She watched, she waited, and in the shadows, Naledi's plan was only beginning. It was a quiet afternoon in Amara's small apartment in Mji Kuu. The world outside was buzzing with her name, posters, billboards, music shows. But inside, she was just a girl sitting on the floor, sorting through her old things. Her ragged cloth bag lay in the corner, the same one she had carried when Selena threw her out that rainy night. She hadn't opened it in weeks. As she emptied the contents, she found a few broken hairpins, an old handkerchief, and a faded photo of her father. Then her fingers brushed against something strange. A small envelope, soft and dusty, tucked deep into the inner pocket. Her heart skipped. She didn't remember putting it there. With shaky hands, she pulled it out and saw her name written on it in a beautiful, gentle script. Amara. She stared at it, her breath catching. She slowly opened it, careful not to tear the fragile paper inside. The letter began with words that made her eyes fill with tears instantly. "My sweet daughter, if you are reading this, I'm no longer with you in this world." Amara's hands trembled as she read on. "I had hoped to watch you grow, to sing with you, to hold you during storms. But fate has another plan. So I leave you these words, my voice on paper, to carry with you when mine is no longer around." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she continued. The world felt like it had stopped moving. "You were born for greatness, my child. Your voice is not just a gift. It is your shield, your sword, your magic. When people try to silence you, sing louder. When the world turns cold, wrap yourself in the warmth of your dreams." Amara pressed the letter to her heart, as if trying to hug the words. The feeling was unlike anything she had ever known, like a piece of her soul had just come home. "I know life may not be fair to you. Some may treat you like you don't matter. But always remember, you are light, you are fire, you are not meant to stay hidden in the shadows." Her voice cracked as she whispered the next line out loud. "Never let darkness dim your light." Amara broke down, not with sadness, but with something deeper. Grief mixed with strength, pain mixed with peace. She hadn't known her mother. Selena had never spoken of her. But now, through this letter, she had met the woman who gave her life, and her mother believed in her. Even before the world did, she sat with the letter for a long time, not wanting to fold it back. She finally placed it in a golden frame and set it beside her bed. Every morning after that, she would read a line from it. Whenever the pressure of fame felt too heavy, or when she missed the girl she used to be, that night during an interview, the host asked her, "What keeps you grounded, Amara? With all this attention, how do you stay so calm, so kind?" She smiled softly and replied, "A letter from someone who saw my light before the world ever did." The next day, Amara shared the letter online with a caption that read, "I never got to meet my mother, but her voice found me when I needed it most. This is for anyone who feels lost. Your light is still inside you." Within hours, the post went viral. Thousands of people, especially young girls, commented that they felt seen, inspired, even healed. Many wrote, "I cried reading this." Others shared their own stories of being abandoned, forgotten, and found again. The letter became more than just words. It became a movement. People began quoting it, singing it, printing it on posters and t-shirts. Never let darkness dim your light. And somewhere, in that quiet apartment, Amara sat with her hands over her heart, feeling closer to her mother than ever before. She whispered, "I will not let you down. I promise." It started with a simple post on social media. Just a few words from an old woman in Kubwa village. But those words hit the internet like fire in dry grass. "I knew Selina before she married Amara's father. That woman never loved him. She just wanted his money. And after he died, she turned his daughter into her housemaid." Within minutes, people began sharing the post. Screenshots flooded every platform. Some thought it was fake. But then came the photos, old pictures from the village. Amara's father smiling kindly, standing beside Selina. And in the background, a tiny barefoot Amara sweeping the yard. The woman who posted it, Mji Kuu, was a respected elder in Kubwa. People knew she never lied. She wrote another message. "I stayed silent for years, but no more. That child suffered while Selina and her daughter lived like queens. She would beat her, starve her, and tell her she was useless. Now the world loves Amara. But I remember when she had no one." The public couldn't believe it. Thousands of comments came pouring in. How could a woman treat a child like that? No wonder Amara's songs sound like pain. They come from real hurt. Selina doesn't deserve forgiveness. Soon, reporters came knocking on doors in Kubwa. Other neighbors stepped forward, confirming the story. They remembered little Amara walking barefoot in the rain, doing all the chores while Nahledi played with dolls. One man said, "I once gave her bread because she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Selina told her she didn't need food if she wasn't working hard enough." Back in the city, Selina was trying to keep up appearances, but the news hit her like a brick wall. One morning she woke up to find angry messages flooding her phone. "Gold digger, we know what you did." She turned on the TV and saw her face on the news, not as a concerned mother, but as the cruel woman who nearly destroyed a rising star. Nahledi panicked. "Mama, what do we do? People are calling us monsters." But Selina had no answer. Her lies had finally cracked, and the truth was pouring out for all to see. Meanwhile, Amara stayed quiet. She didn't post, didn't comment, didn't react. But her silence was powerful. It told the world she didn't need revenge. Truth was speaking for her now. In one of her interviews later that week, the host gently asked, "Amara, do you have anything to say to the people who hurt you?" She took a breath and said softly, "I've already said everything I needed to say through my song." That one sentence touched millions. While Selina faced the shame of the world, Amara kept rising, carried not by hate, but by the strength of her truth. And Mji Kuu's final post said it all. The past may be dark, but it's the light that always shines the longest. Nahledi had always lived in the shadow of her sister's growing fame, and it burned her inside. She couldn't understand how the same girl she used to laugh at, the girl who wore torn clothes and washed the dishes, was now shining on the biggest stages of Africa. Every time she saw Amara on TV, her heart twisted with jealousy. One evening, Nahledi quietly sneaked into Amara's old room in Kubwa. There she found a notebook filled with handwritten lyrics and melody notes. On the first page, in soft pencil, it read, "When the world turns away, let your voice become the sun." Nahledi smirked. She tore out the page and stuffed it into her bag. A few days later, a new singing competition opened up in a nearby town. Mji Kuu rising voices. Naledi saw her chance. She signed up using a fake name, wore a glittery dress, and rehearsed the stolen song over and over. She didn't understand the meaning behind the lyrics, but she hoped the judges wouldn't notice. When it was her turn to perform, she stepped onto the stage, trying to act confident. The lights were bright, the audience quiet. She began to sing, but her voice trembled. It was pretty, but it lacked depth. It lacked soul. It wasn't Amara. One of the judges, a sharp woman named Afia, leaned forward. She whispered something to the others. As Naledi finished the song, trying to fake a few high notes, the room stayed silent. Then Afia spoke. "That song, where did you get it?" Naledi froze. I wrote it," she lied. The judge frowned. "Funny, because I've heard this exact song before. From Amara. She sang it during a private rehearsal months ago, and let me be very clear, that wasn't your voice." The audience gasped. Cameras zoomed in. Naledi's face turned pale. One of the staff members pulled out their phone and played a clip of Amara humming the same melody in an interview. It was over. Security asked Naledi to step down. The organizers released a statement later that night. Contestant disqualified for plagiarism and impersonation. Original song belongs to Amara, Africa's soul voice. The internet exploded. Memes, angry tweets, video edits. Naledi the faker started trending. Amara didn't say much. She simply posted a clip of herself singing the original song with the caption, "Truth doesn't need to shout, it sings." Meanwhile, Naledi locked herself in her room, ashamed and humiliated. She never expected to be exposed like that. She thought she could wear her sister's voice like a dress, but it didn't fit. It never would. Because what made Amara special wasn't just her voice, it was the pain behind it, the hope woven into every note, the light that had survived even the darkest nights, and that could never be stolen. The email came early in the morning. While Amara was sipping tea by her small apartment window, she almost thought it was a mistake at first. The subject line read, "World Tour Offer, from Africa to the World." It was from a well-known music agent in South Africa named Jabahri Okafor. He'd seen her viral interview, heard her songs, and watched every performance she had given. His message was full of excitement. "Amara, the world needs to hear your voice. We want to take you on a 12-country tour. South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, UK, and even the USA. Your voice is not just music, it's a movement." At first, her heart jumped. A world tour. Her name on global stages, bright lights, cheering crowds, her story being heard by millions. It sounded like a dream. But something inside her felt heavy. She thought about Mahma Tehma, who gave her hope. About Bahba Tunde, the street vendor who shared bread with her when she had nothing. About the children still sleeping under broken carts in Mji Kuu, just like she once did. And about her village, Kubwa, with its dusty paths and whispering trees, where her mother once sang lullabies. Later that night, her manager asked excitedly, "Amara, are we saying yes?" This could change everything. But Amara stared at the screen, her fingers still. Then she quietly said, "Fame means nothing if I forget where I came from. If I leave now, will I still be the girl who sang from pain, or just another name in flashing lights?" The team around her didn't understand. They saw money, fame, awards. But Amara saw something deeper. She remembered sleeping on the cold ground, singing quietly so the night wouldn't feel so lonely. That voice, the one the world loved, was born in silence, not in studio. She didn't reject the offer. She asked for time. She needed to think. That evening, she walked through the same streets where she once begged for food. A little girl selling flowers looked up at her and whispered, "Are you the singing lady from the TV?" Amara knelt beside her and said, "Yes. But once I was just like you." The girl smiled and handed her a flower. "Then maybe I'll be on TV too." That simple moment felt louder than the biggest concert. Amara held the flower close, looked up at the stars and whispered, "I'll go, but I'll never leave." Because even if her feet walked on stages across the world, her heart would always stay in Mji Kuu. The sun rose slowly over the village of Kubwa, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. It was the same sky that had once watched a young girl named Amara cry alone in the cold, thrown out like trash. But today, the winds carried a different song, one of hope, not sorrow. Amara stood quietly in the middle of an open piece of land, her eyes filled with emotion. This was the exact spot where years ago her stepmother, Selina, had screamed at her in front of the whole village. "You'll never be anything," Selina had said. "You're worthless." But today, construction workers moved quickly, laying bricks and painting walls. A beautiful sign had already been installed, the Amara's School of Voices and Light. Children ran around the edges of the site, laughing and singing little songs. Most of them were barefoot, some had no parents. Many had voices, soft, unsure voices that the world had never heard. Amara looked at them and smiled gently. "No girl should sleep on the streets with a voice no one hears," she said softly to the reporters nearby. "I know how it feels when no one listens, when no one believes in you. That's why I'm building this school, not just to teach music, but to give hope." The idea had come to her after the world tour offer. While others told her to chase fame, Amara felt something tugging at her heart. She remembered how a single kind word from a stranger had changed her path, how one piece of bread and a warm blanket had kept her alive. She wanted to become that light for someone else. The school wasn't just a building, it was a message, a promise. It had classrooms for voice training, instruments donated by musicians across Africa, and even a small studio where girls could record their own songs. But more than anything, it had space for stories, space for broken girls to find their strength. On the day of the school's soft opening, the villagers of Kubwa gathered around, some whispering in awe, others holding back tears. Even those who once ignored her now clapped and smiled. Children sang songs of joy, their tiny voices echoing across the hills. Selina stood far behind the crowd, hidden under a scarf. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. She had never imagined that the same girl she kicked out like garbage would come back like this. Not with revenge, but with love and power. Amara didn't look her way. She wasn't here to make Selina feel pain. She was here for every little girl who had ever been silenced. During her speech, Amara took a deep breath. "This is not just a music school," she said. "It's a home, a place where your voice is safe, where your story matters, where your pain becomes your power." The crowd erupted in applause. Later that day, a young girl named Mji came up to her. She had big eyes and a nervous smile. "Miss Amara," she whispered, "I have a song, but I don't know if it's good." Amara knelt down and took her hand. "If it's your truth, it's already beautiful." And just like that, the cycle of hope began. Amara had once been a forgotten voice in the dark, but now she had built a place where no voice would be forgotten again. The grand opening of the Amara's School of Voices and Light was brighter than any festival Kubwa had ever seen. Colorful ribbons danced in the wind, children sang joyfully, and villagers gathered from all corners to witness the moment. Cameras flashed, reporters asked questions, and music filled the air. Amara stood tall on stage, dressed in soft gold, with her hair braided neatly, a true symbol of grace and strength. Just as the final song ended and the crowd began to cheer, something unexpected happened. A hush fell over the audience as a familiar face stepped forward. Selina. She was dressed in a dull shawl, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. In her trembling hands, she held a wrapped box, something she called a gift. Her lips quivered and she put on a sad face as she slowly walked toward the stage. Amara's heart skipped a beat when she saw her. For a moment, she felt like a child again, scared and small. But then she took a deep breath. This wasn't the same Amara who once cried in the rain. She was no longer broken. Selina reached the steps of the stage, her voice shaking. "Amara, my daughter," she said, forcing out a tear. "I made mistakes. I was hurt too. Life was hard for me. Please forgive me. This is for you." She held out the box. People in the crowd began whispering. Some looked angry, others confused. The children fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Amara stepped forward slowly, looking her stepmother in the eyes. Then she gently took the microphone and spoke, not with anger, but with calm and strength. "You left me in the rain with nothing," she said. "You told me I was worthless. You didn't just take away a home, you took away love, safety and kindness. Selina tried to speak again, but Amara held up her hand. I am not here to embarrass you. I'm not here for revenge. I built this school so no other girl feels what I felt. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. She stayed strong. I believe in forgiveness, she continued, but forgiveness doesn't mean giving someone another chance to hurt you again. The entire crowd gasped. Then, after a beat, a round of applause broke out, slow at first, then louder, then rising like a wave. People stood. They clapped not just for Amara's words, but for her courage to speak the truth in front of the one who tried to break her. Selina's face fell. Her fake tears stopped. She looked around, realizing this wasn't her moment. Her trick hadn't worked. She lowered her head, dropped the gift on the ground, and slowly turned away. Amara didn't watch her go. She turned back to the crowd and smiled gently. This school is for the forgotten, she said, her voice steady. But we don't forget who we are, and we never let pain become a cage. That night, while stars lit the sky, Amara sang for the children, songs of freedom, healing, and strength. And for the first time, the village of Kubwa didn't just see a girl with a golden voice. They saw a queen. The song was called Daughter of the Rain. It started with a soft hum, just like the lullaby Amara used to sing to herself when she was cold and alone under that broken cart in Mji Kuu. The first lines were quiet, full of pain, but as the music rose, so did the strength in her voice. It told a story, not just her story, but the story of every girl who had ever been forgotten. Every child who had cried in the dark, every soul who had ever been thrown away like trash and still dared to dream. Amara didn't just release a song. She opened a wound and poured music into it. When Daughter of the Rain first dropped online, people didn't just listen. They froze. Some cried. Some stood still in their kitchens. Others pulled over their cars to hear every word. Within hours, the song went viral. Within a day, it became a national cry for hope. Radio stations played it non-stop. TV channels invited Amara to speak about the meaning behind her lyrics. But she always said the same thing. That song is not just mine, it belongs to anyone who's ever felt unseen. Children in school started singing it during morning assembly. Young girls sang it while fetching water from the wells. A choir of orphans performed it during a festival in Lusaka and made the entire audience weep. Even the president of the country tweeted, "Every nation has a song that wakes its soul. Ours is Daughter of the Rain." Back in Kubwa, the village where Amara had once been kicked out like dirt, something changed. Children who had never spoken her name before now sang her song as they played. Mothers hummed it while making dinner. The same people who once ignored her pain now played her music loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. And Selina, she couldn't escape it. Everywhere she turned, there it was. In the market, at the bus station, even at the tiny shop near her house. Daughter of the Rain followed her like a shadow. Not in anger, not as punishment, but as a reminder. Amara didn't release the song for revenge. She released it to heal. One day, a little girl in tattered clothes stood outside the Amara's School of Voices and Light, singing the song word for word, her eyes closed, her voice full of emotion. Amara watched from her office window, tears sliding down her cheeks. That moment was everything. She stepped outside, walked over to the girl and knelt down beside her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Zuri," the girl whispered shyly. "Do you know why I wrote that song?" Amara asked, brushing the dust from the girl's cheek. Zuri nodded. "Because the rain didn't wash you away, it made you grow." Amara smiled, stunned at the wisdom in the girl's words. She pulled her into a hug, and the cameras caught the perfect shot. That photo later became the cover of Amara's Music Foundation website. Amara and Zuri, two daughters of the rain, holding each other in the sunlight. The song didn't just make charts, it made change. People began donating to shelters. Music schools for girls started opening in smaller towns. Survivors of abuse began sharing their own stories, saying, "If she can rise, so can we." Daughter of the Rain wasn't just a hit, it was a movement, and at the center of it stood Amara. Not broken, not bitter, but shining like the very light her mother once wrote about. You were born for greatness. Never let darkness dim your light. And she never did. The documentary was called When Karma Comes with Cameras. It was aired on every major channel across Africa and uploaded on every streaming platform. Within minutes, it started trending. People didn't just watch it, they felt every second of it. The opening showed young Amara sitting alone under a cart in the rain, shivering, hungry, broken. Then came her voice, that golden voice that shook a nation. As the film played, millions saw her pain, her rejection, her nights on the street. They saw Baba Tunde giving her bread. They saw Zola Ndedi stop in her tracks, eyes wide at Amara's voice. They saw the first audition, the standing ovation, the interviews, the viral songs, the foundation, the school. And then came the ending. The camera cut to a small, dimly lit room in the village of Kubwa. Selina sat alone, her eyes locked on the screen. No makeup, no fancy clothes. Just a broken woman watching the girl she once called nothing become everything. On the screen, the world chanted, "Amara, Amara, Amara." The camera zoomed in on Selina's face. She didn't cry, she didn't speak. She just stared, like someone who finally realized what they'd lost forever. Her hands trembled slightly and her lips quivered, but no words came out. That was the final shot. The screen faded to black with one line, "This is what happens when a voice refuses to be silenced." And in that silence, millions felt the power of karma and the rise of a girl who turned pain into purpose. If you enjoyed this story, I'm certain you'll enjoy the next one showing on your screen right now. Please click on the thumbnail to watch the next story. I'd appreciate your support. Like this video, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to my channel. See you in my next story. Bye.